Aloha, welcome to our video on the rock cycle. In this video, we'll define what a rock is. We'll also describe the rock cycle and the three major types of rocks, and then finally we'll list the forces that power the Earth's rock cycle. Okay, so to begin, we need to define what is a rock. And a rock is going to be a solid mass of mineral or mineral-like matter that occurs naturally and is part of our planet. Okay, so if it is solid, it can be a rock. If it occurs naturally, meaning it's naturally there, it counts as a rock. And as long as it's part of our planet, it's going to be a rock. Okay, so you're going to hear an awful lot about the rock cycle. And the rock cycle quite simply tells us the kinds of rocks, how they're made, and then how they can transform from one variety into another. When the planet Earth started, it was basically a bunch of magma. Okay, remember that magma is molten rock below the surface. When it reaches the surface, we change the name over to lava, but basically it's going to be magma while it's below. When that magma cools, the rocks that form are going to be called igneous rocks, and we'll talk about igneous rocks a little further, but we have this cooling process right over here that forms our igneous rocks. Now, our igneous rocks can go through weathering and erosion, okay? And the weathering and erosion will break it down into smaller pieces. Those smaller pieces we're going to call sediment, right? And sediment goes through the process of compaction and cementation, and that's how we get our sedimentary rocks. So now we can have our magma and our melting process that forms the magma. It'll cool out, form this igneous rock, and then it goes through weathering and erosion, and then through compaction and cementation, and that's how we get our sedimentary rock. Now, if we bury a rock, if it gets buried below the surface, then we can expose it to an awful lot of heat and pressure. And this heat and pressure can cause the rock to change. And when we get a changed rock, something that's totally new, then we end up with what we call metamorphic rocks. Okay, so now our metamorphic rocks, if it's under the ground, if it gets exposed back up to the surface, then our metamorphic rock can then go through this way, go through weathering and erosion, and it can become sediment, can become a sedimentary rock again. That sedimentary rock is pushed underground, but this time, instead of metamorphosizing, it melts back into magma. Then it can cool off and it can become an igneous rock. So you can see how all of these steps are interrelated. We can go from one type of rock to the other at any way. There's different pathways. They go through the same processes, so they always have to melt and cool to become igneous rock. They're always going to have to be applied heat and pressure to become a metamorphic rock. And then they'll always go through weathering and erosion to form sediment, and then compaction and cementation to form sedimentary rock. So the rock cycle, when you understand that, you understand the origins of the different types of rocks, and we'll talk about those different types of rocks a little bit later on in this unit. Okay, so now that we understand the rock cycle, where does the energy come that allows the rock cycle to work? Most of the energy in the rock cycle is going to come from the center of the Earth, from the heat that's generated by the core of the Earth. This heat is going to be what melts the rocks down into magma, and then allows that magma to cool off afterwards and form igneous rock. But the heat's also that heat that's going to be applied to rocks with additional pressure of being underground, so that we have our metamorphic rocks. When we get to sedimentary rocks, we have a little bit of help from the sun over here. What the sun will do is the sun drives our weather conditions, which can cause the weathering and erosion. So we'll see that the sun provide a little bit of energy for our sedimentary rocks. But for the most part, it's going to be that geothermal energy in our Earth. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the term. We'll also discuss the rest of our types of rocks in a lot more detail a little bit later on in this unit. But that's it for this video. So as always, good luck on your lessons, and we'll see you in the next video.